sixth graders, welcome to our last lesson for chapter 1. We are going to be going over something that was in the middle of the chapter, but it was like a sidebar, and I want to go over it because I think it's really important and it's going to set us up very nicely for all of the rest of our year in history. So I need you to get out your textbook and I need you to turn to page 11, and then you need to be on page 8 in your SAM, in your Student Activities Manual. So you got both of those? Let's get started. We're going to talk about the features of a civilization, because we're going to, you have all these chapters, right? The Mesopotamian civilization and the Greek civilization and the Egyptian civilization. Why do we call those groups of people, some groups of people get called a civilization and some groups don't? So let's talk about that. The word civilization, which I've written here, and you can kind of see I've kind of copied what is on page 8 in your workbook, but the word civilization actually comes from a Latin word that means a citizen of a city. You might hear the word civil in it, you might hear the word civics in it, and it's all from the same word. A civilization, as our book defines it, is a group of people who have established cities, government, social classes, specialized jobs, arts, science, written language, and religion. So we're going to talk about each one of those categories as being a feature of a civilization. We're not going to go in real in-depth into any of this, but just enough so that you can be aware of it, so that when we talk about each civilization going forward, you'll kind of know where we're going and what we're going to be doing. So the first one we want to talk about is organized cities and governments. And it does not matter to me which block you write it in. I'm gonna write it over here and work my way around this way. So organized cities and government. Now this is just a little freebie, but if you're taking notes and you want to write the word government, you can make a shortened form of it, G-O-V''T, and that's how to kind of abbreviate government. You wouldn't do that if you were writing a formal paper, but when you're just taking notes and you want to go a little more quickly, that's a great way to abbreviate the word government. Organized cities and government. What does that mean? That means that there are cities that are a central location for everything else that comes out of that civilization. We might call it a capital city. So the city is the central location for the government, for religion, for culture. You've got a government that manages things, manages the resources, provides defense, a lot of the things our own government does for us, right? An economic system, and rules of conduct. What are the laws? So an organized government is going to provide that, and that's one of the features of a civilization. The second feature of a civilization that I want to talk about is social classes. We don't like this in America. We like to think that we don't have social classes. Our Declaration of Independence says that I've dropped all my pens, sorry. All men are created equal, right? We want to believe that. And that is true. All people, God has created us all as individuals with a soul, and we matter. But if you look around, it's pretty easy to see that there are social classes. Different levels of people that are divided into different groups. Some civilizations have their social classes organized by family. Some civilizations have them organized by job. When we talk about, for instance, the ancient Egyptians, we're going to talk about the levels of hierarchy that they had and who was at the top and who was at the bottom. Some societies, the social classes are divided by income. How wealthy you are dictates what your social class is. In a society, each person has a role in their social class. Now, some societies are more fluid. Here in America, if you're born into the lower class economically, you can work hard and do your best, and you can change social classes. You could rise to a different economic social class. There are other societies where when you're born into a specific class, that's the class you stay in. You don't ever get to leave it. We'll talk about some societies like that. But social classes are an important part of a civilization. Whether they're fluid or whether they're rigid, they are an important part. The third one is job specialization. Job specialization. These markers make funny noises. Job specialization. What does that mean? Well, that means that each person or each family focuses on one thing that they do. So in a civilization, a lot of times, you start out with, like, we think about like the American pioneer and how when they, came west, they had to know how to do everything, right? They made their own cloth, they made their own tools, they made their own everything. But as a civilization grows, you get job specialization where, like, I might find out that I'm really good at blacksmithing, and so I'm going to set up a blacksmith shop, and that's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to grow my own food. I'll buy my food from the farmer next door. And so this actually creates an economic system where people are dependent on each other. The fourth one is probably one of my favorites, and that is arts, sciences, and written language. Now, I will say that you do not have to have a written language to be considered a civilization. There have been civilizations that have transmitted everything via oral tradition, and while it's not quite as accurate as writing things down, it works. So this one is not necessarily a requirement to be a civilization, especially if everything else exists. But let's talk about that. When people become a civilization, when they begin to be working together, and with the job specialization and doing different things, what happens is you eventually have people who want to make art, who want to make music, who want to communicate in those ways. And art and science develop along with a civilization. Every single civilization we're going to study this year has artists and scientists and people who transmit stories, whether that's through the written language or through oral tradition. Those are all very important. In every civilization we are going to talk about. Art has been important from the very earliest civilizations, as has science. And when we talk about science, we don't necessarily mean, experiments and this and that, but any kind of creation of any kind of technology moves science and mathematics forward, and science and math then can move those technology advances forward. So those are all part of a civilization. And the last one that we're going to talk about really quickly is, I think, one of the most interesting things we'll study this year, and that is the religion of every civilization. The idea of atheism, of not believing in any God at all, is a relatively new development on the human scene. That didn't come, people didn't start becoming atheists, in large numbers, really until maybe only for the last 250 years or so. So you've got 6,000 years of human history where pretty much everybody believed that there was a god or some gods. They believed in a higher power. And so religion plays a really big role in every civilization we're going to study this year. So, you've got that down. I am really excited that we finished and wrapped up chapter 1, because what that means is that we can move on to chapter 2 after we take our test. And chapter 2 is where we get to start digging into some specific civilizations and learning about some specific people and how they lived, and I cannot wait to share that with you. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a great evening.